Thank you, Eric. Will you please pray with me? Holy God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations upon all of our hearts be worthy in your sight and in keeping with the teachings of your Son, Jesus Christ, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. The famous song, "I'll Be Home for Christmas," performed by Bing Crosby, was originally written to convey the feelings of a soldier deployed at Christmas time. The soldier requests the family please have snow and mistletoe and presents on the tree as they wait for him to return. The song ends, however, revealing that this is all just a fantasy, a wish that the soldier could be home in time for the holidays to experience them. For a lot of people, Christmas is a time of homecoming. Many people don't get to see family until the holiday season. Even if people aren't overseas at war, there is still a deep nostalgic longing for the Christmases of old, where families are together. And this is played up really heavily in our culture. There are countless movies about the real present of Christmas being love, or all we really want for Christmas is to be with family. And I hardly blame people for feeling this way. There can be a peace and tranquility to being with family, whether they are your blood relatives or the family of your own choosing. And boy, could we use some peace and tranquility. 2023 has been crazy with wars in Ukraine and Israel, the upcoming election already impacting the news cycle, tragedies in Haiti, along with other problems that dog us. It's very tempting to want something different. And in some ways, that is what Advent is all about. We tend to think of Advent with soft, tender moments, an infant with his mother, and angels singing above. But Advent is also a reminder about Christ's return. Just as Jesus came once before, a key part of our faith is waiting for Christ's return, where all things will be made new. Initially, especially after the readings I gave Deb, this may seem shocking and scary. Jesus plays up the uncertainty and power of his return. No one knows when it will be, but you better be ready, he says. And Jesus will come with power from the clouds. This is so opposite of how we typically see Christmas. For Christmas, Jesus shows up at the same time every year, tender and mild. On his return, it will be the opposite. So, what in the world are we supposed to do with that? The thing that Jesus describes in the reading doesn't feel Christmassy at all. But really, Christmas is a reminder of God working within our history in unexpected ways and at unexpected times. We're so used to Christmas being standard at the same time every year, and it conforming to our own understanding of time. that we tend to forget how out of nowhere Christmas really was. Remember that no one was really expecting Jesus at the time. People were certainly looking for a Messiah, but most weren't expecting a baby from Nazareth, born in Bethlehem, to be the Messiah. Only a few people really knew of it, a group of shepherds, a few astrologers, and his own parents, although I'm not sure how much they believed the idea that they heard themselves. It wasn't like the birth of a prince, where the whole country celebrates. It had relatively very little impact on world powers. Rome didn't know or care about it. God's sense of time and planning are different than ours. And it shows through how God has worked in the past. Jesus is trying to show us the same thing about the future. We all have expectations of when and how God should come back, and we have had those expectations for a very long time. People tend to believe Jesus is going to be coming back in their lifetime, in part because the Bible tells them to expect it. But there's also a bias that because we are alive right now, this must be when Jesus returns. This is why we have so many false predictions of the end of the world throughout history. People naturally think the time that they live in is the most important. But God doesn't work on our time, or at least not our expectations of time. Think about how God has acted in your life. Has God always answered your prayers exactly how you wanted them answered? Has God ever broken into your life when you least expected it, or maybe even when you least wanted it? Let's face it, God doesn't work on our schedule. God is not a magic lamp or a fairy godparent. Because God's time is not our time. God's work in history may seem random and chaotic. But then we see the work of God in our world. The freedom of captives, the end of tyranny, the forgiveness of sins. And we see that somehow it all works out. When I think about it, I'll Be Home for Christmas is very similar to a different Christmas song that we already sang, O Come, Emmanuel. Both are about longing. Crosby's song is almost a cry for his family, capturing a desire to be with them in a simpler time, something that still rings true to us today. The other song is a cry from Israel and from the world for Christ to come and save us. And that rings true 2,000 years ago and now. Both songs are about longing for change from the current woes. In a way, Christmas looks back at the past, but also forward towards the future. Just as Christmas once broke into our history so long ago, it's a reminder that Christ will break into history again, and that we need to make sure we don't get caught up in our time and all of its trappings, so much so that we forget that the world actually runs on God's time. So as we enter into Advent and we await the coming of Christ, remember that we also await Jesus' coming once again. Just as God broke into history and our lives before, we await for God to do so again. Amen.